Right, good afternoon and welcome. This is Debbie Oldham from Governance Services. Under Agenda Item 1, Councillor Paul Ray was nominated as Chair prior to the start of the meeting. Are all members agreeable with this? Thank you. Therefore, Councillor Ray is formally elected as Chair. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the remote hearing of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Paul Ray, and I will be chairing today's hearing. Before I proceed further, could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being streamed live onto the City Council's YouTube channel. Could I ask the following members of the subcommittee to please introduce themselves? Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, Councillor Hutchinson, Morley North Ward.
And Councillor Marshall-Cutton.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Abigail Marshall-Cutton, representing Little London Woodhouse and the City Centre.
I'd like to start the hearing today by confirming the meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee meets the requirements of the Council's Constitution, even though members of the panel are in remote attendance. While items today will be fully discussed as usual, remote attendance requires a few slight changes to how I will manage the debate. Therefore, can all attendees mute their microphone unless I invite them to speak? This will avoid disruption from background noise. Can all participants please keep their cameras on during the hearing? And there's my phone going off. All participants will be invited to introduce themselves at the start of the hearing to make it clear to the public observers who will be involved in the proceedings. I ask for your assistance and patience while I go through this process. Could I now invite officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphones once you've introduced yourself? I'll start with Legal Services.
Good afternoon, I'm Robert Brown. I'm a solicitor in Leeds City Council's Legal Services. I'm the legal advisor to the subcommittee today, and I'm accompanied by my colleague and fellow solicitor, Philippa Murray.
Entertainment Licensing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew, part of Entertainment Licensing, and today I'm supported by Samantha Longfellow-Pennicott.
Governance Services.
Good afternoon, I'm Debbie Oldham. I'm clerk today for the meeting, and assisting me is Natasha Prosser.
Thank you. So moving to the agenda, could I ask the clerk to go through agenda item number 2 to 5?
Thank you. Under Agenda Item 2, there are no appeals against refusal of inspection of documents. Under Agenda Item 3, there are no exempt items. Agenda Item 4, there are no late items. And Agenda Item 5, could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests?
None from myself.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6, application for the grant of a premises licence for the Fat Hippo Restaurant Limited, ground floor, White Rose House, 8 Otley Road, Headingley, Leeds, LS6 2AD. Could I ask the applicant and their representatives to introduce themselves first?
I'm Michael Phillips. I'm the owner of the Fat Hippo Restaurants Limited.
Thank you.
Paddy Were, licensing solicitor representing the applicant.
Thank you. Could I ask the responsible authorities and objectors to introduce themselves? So the principal licensing officer first, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sue Duckworth and I'm representing the licensing authority.
And West Yorkshire Police, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Dave Park from West Yorkshire Police Licensing.
Thank you very much. Could the legal advisor to the subcommittee outline the procedure for the hearing? You're on mute, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. Our usual procedure for this type of application is that the applicant addresses the subcommittee first, and then any other parties who have indicated an intention to speak at the hearing will then address the committee, and then the applicant has the chance to respond to anything said by the other parties. Representations have been received from the licensing authority and from West Yorkshire Police today. In making its determination, the subcommittee will consider what is appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives. Namely, 1, the prevention of crime and disorder, 2, public safety, 3, the prevention of public nuisance, 4, the protection of children from harm. The regulations permit the subcommittee to set a time limit on presentations, provided the same time limit is applied to all parties. Our usual time limit is 15 minutes per party. The applicant may wish to split their allocation between their initial presentation and the response to the other parties, for example, 10 minutes initially and 5 minutes at the end. Can I ask the parties, starting with the applicant's representative, do they feel that 15 minutes will be sufficient time for them to make their presentations?
Yes, I'm very happy to split my time as you suggested, 10 minutes to make my application and 5 minutes to come back and deal with anything that comes out of the submissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Duckworth?
Yes, that's plenty. Thank you.
And Mr. Parker?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then a time limit of 15 minutes will apply to all parties. After each presentation, the subcommittee members may wish to ask questions. The time for questions to be asked and answered is in addition to the time limit set for presentations. Please note that we do not permit cross-examination in subcommittee. If any party feels there is a crucial question that needs to be asked and answered, please do not ask the person directly, but instead make a request to the chair, who will determine whether or not the question should be put. Parties may request permission to call witnesses. Can I ask if any party wishes to call any witnesses today?
I will deal with my application, and Michael's obviously here to deal with any questions operationally, but I'll try and deal with the application.
Thank you. All documents that have previously been submitted have been copied and circulated to the subcommittee in advance. You should all be working from the same original pack consisting of a main bundle numbered to 152. It would be helpful when referring to documents to identify which document you're referring to by its bundle page number. Additional documents may now only be tabled with the consent of all parties. Are there any other documents which any party wishes to refer to? No. Thank you. Please note your presentation is your opportunity to address the subcommittee, so you need to make sure that you've included in your presentation everything that you wish to say and have taken into account. After the parties have made their presentations and after any questions, the subcommittee members will go into a private session. If members have any additional questions to ask, they will return to the main meeting to ask those questions. They will then go back into private session to make their decision. Can all parties please remain in the meeting until they are asked to leave? All the parties will be informed once the hearing has ended and will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 working days of today. Can I ask if there are any other questions or representations about the procedure we propose to follow before we commence the hearing? Okay. One thing I should have perhaps asked whether the responsible authorities have any preference as to which order they address the committee in. Okay, so shall we say police first and then followed by the licensing authority? Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could the licensing officer present the application?
Yeah, of course, Chair. Thank you. So today members are asked to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence. This is for Fatty Paw Restaurants Limited, ground floor, White Rose House, 8 Otley Road, Headingley, Leeds, LS6. The premises wishes to operate as a restaurant. The applicant is Fatty Paw Restaurants Limited, and in summary, the application is for the sale by retail of alcohol for consumption both on and off the premises, and that's to take place every day from 11 AM until 11 PM. In order to promote the licensing objectives, the applicant has offered certain measures which can be viewed in section M of the application form attached to Appendix A of the report. One of the conditions offered by the applicant is a restriction that all alcohol sales consumption both on and off the premises will be ancillary to food sales. Further supporting information has been provided by the applicant, which can be viewed at Appendix B of the report on page 31. The application has attracted representations from both the Licensing Authority and West Yorkshire Police in their capacities as responsible authorities. The representations are made on the grounds of the premises location within the Headingley Cumulative Impact Area, which is an area suffering from a cumulative impact of licensed premises and leading to problems which undermine the licensing objectives. A copy of the representation by the Licensing Authority is available at Appendix D of the agenda pack on page 45. And the representation by West Yorkshire Police is available at Appendix E on page 65, and both representations include supporting evidence. A copy of the cumulative impact assessment that provides the background and evidence for implementing the policy can be found on page 131, Appendix F of the report. And finally, a list of licensed premises within the area of the applying premises including their licensable activities and hours, can be found at Appendix G on page 149. Thank you, Chair.
Unmute myself. Thank you very much for that. Could I now invite the applicant to present the application?
Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much to Matthew for setting out the nature of this application. Fat Hippo is a quality independent burger restaurant that initially started in the Newcastle area, first of all in Jesmond and then Newcastle city centre, then Durham, Nottingham, and now this application in Leeds. Chair, members of the committee, you will, I think, be helped to know that the operator trades in cumulative impact policy areas in Jesmond, Newcastle city centre and Nottingham, and has in this application mirrored the application that was put into those licensing authorities. There's no regulated entertainment asked for. The licenses to have only the sale of alcohol as a licensable activity till 2300 hours. It's a true restaurant, so the restaurant condition has been offered, which again should give you some comfort. Importantly, the sales wet to dry is 10% to 90%. So 90% of the turnover at these premises comes from the food sales. But obviously it's important for a restaurant of this calibre to be able to offer a drink to people who want to have a beer or a cocktail or some wine with the high quality menu which I've provided to you. My clients have taken a lease for 10 years over these premises. They're spending £300,000 and they will create 25 new jobs in this outlet. So I think in this current climate, it's certainly not to be sniffed at that somebody's continuing to invest and wants to invest in this particular area. I think it's safe to say, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, to suggest that with this operating schedule, with it being a restaurant license and having the track record that my clients have elsewhere, if this hadn't have been in the cumulative impact policy, then I'm presuming we wouldn't have been troubling the committee with a hearing today. But because we're in the CIP, we've had representations received to the application, which again, Matthew's highlighted to you. I'd just like to deal with the cumulative impact policy, which as an experienced committee, you will be aware, it isn't an absolute prohibition to granting new premises licenses within the area. It's for you to assess, I think, very much in line with paragraphs 7.36 to 7.38 of the local policy, just really what the impact of these premises will have should you grant a license. That's what we're assessing today. Yes, it's accepted that there are issues in Headingley, but being realistic, would these premises, would this style of operation with a premises license selling a modest amount of alcohol to people who are eating with all seated and no regulated entertainment, would it have a negative impact? Would it create an additional problem to what's happened in the Headingley area through, I think, what's been described very clearly in the policy and the background documents that have been provided? I would just touch on that really, that those documents and the data that provides the cumulative impact policy for Headingley is perhaps, as all CIPs are now, out of date on the back of the year that we've had with the pandemic. And that is a material consideration for you as a starting point. It's appreciated, obviously, that it's impossible for the policy to be up to date at this moment in time. But I think if you've got an operator who trades in other cumulative impact policy areas without having any adverse impact on the licensable activities, who's come before you today with a quality food offer, all seated, the restaurant condition, which is obviously critical, but also not seeking any other regulated entertainment, then I think in the circumstances you should be looking favourably to exercise your discretion to grant this application. Chair, members of the committee, I have just included the Brewdog decision for you to have a look at really when you're determining this, because That was a case in the Leeds city centre where Brewdog were refused the premises licence in what is now the red zone of the cumulative impact policy area, actually just outside it now. And that application, although refused, was granted on appeal, and the district judge, I think, critically said that a simple increase in footfall isn't a rational reason to refuse entry into the area for, as it were, then Brewdog. And he talks about the issues of certainly the fact that the policy should be made for man rather than the man made for policy. And I would ask you to bear that as being really relevant to this application, because it's a restaurant, it's a high quality restaurant. It's only going to be selling alcohol to people who are eating and seated, and closing with last orders at 11 o'clock, with the premises finishing their business by 12, no regulated entertainment. So you're going to really be looking to what is likely to be happening on the balance of probabilities. That's the test, obviously, with it being the civil burden of proof. And I think it's important with this being in Headingley that you take into consideration that there are no residential concerns, no objections from the people of Headingley to the grant of a restaurant licence here. And there's two elements, really. What's the direct impact whilst the premises are going to be trading on the licensing objectives? And I would suggest to you that there will be none. That there isn't a suggestion, I think, that restaurants on the whole cause an issue in this particular area. And then what happens when people will leave the premises? Well, they won't be coming to these premises to just drink. They won't be allowed to do that. They will be only having a drink ancillary to a table meal. And those are very relevant considerations for you to take into account when you are looking at the policy and looking at the objections that have been raised to this application. Quite clearly, it is right that a licensing subcommittee should be making the decision on this. But I think you need to bear into mind the quality menu, the fact that there is a significant investment in the judgment that they won't cause any issues here like they haven't in other cumulative impact policy areas. And I would therefore commend the application to you for this to become a very good quality operation in the heart of the commercial centre of Headingley. As I've said, Michael is here, who has all of the detail of the nuts and bolts of the operation, and he can deal with any specific questions. But Chair, I would commend the application to the committee today. I will just, in my closing submissions, deal in a little bit more detail with the policy.
Thank you very much for that. Members of the panel, do you have any questions at this point, or would you like to ask them all after we've heard both submissions?
Yeah, I'll prefer when both submissions have been said, please.
Likewise. Thanks, Councillor Ray.
Mute myself again there. Right, so I've lost where I am on my document now. Could I please ask the objectors to present their case? And I think we're going to hear from West Yorkshire Police first.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. David Parr from West Yorkshire Police, as previously stated. The application is as set out by Mr. Ware and Matthew Nelson, and I won't go into that any further. Yes, the representation is solely on the premises being in a CIP area, as Mr. Ware points out. Basically, the CIP states the nature of the problems are alcoholic-related violent crime and nuisance behaviour being perpetrated upon people visiting the area during the specific peak hours. And also the final, that it will be inconsistent with the council's duty to promote the licensing objectives to grant new and variation applications for any premises licence that seek to operate during the peak hours described in the cumulative impact assessment for Headingley. I can say that obviously the premises aren't operating at the moment, so there's no crime statistics with regards to the premises themselves or issues with regards to the premises. And I feel it fair to say that I've contacted my colleagues in the North East with regards to these operators, and they have no issues at all with the operators, Fat Hippo, in either the Newcastle or the one in County Durham. So the issue isn't necessarily with regards to the operator, but purely with regards to the cumulative impact policy. Mr. Ware points out quite right that the data is somewhat out of date, and especially out of date with regards to the last 8 or 9 months that we've been going through, where licensed premises have been restricted due to the COVID restrictions. The latest data that we do have for the area prior to the implication of the COVID restrictions suggests that the issue is with regards to public order and to assaults within the area. The public order gradually rising and the assaults remaining relatively level over the past few years. But there's nothing to suggest that once the COVID restrictions are removed, that we're not going to go back to that state of affairs. I can go into the data more if you wish me to, but I really don't see that unless you wish it, there will be any great deal for me to put it into my representation. And really the representation is with regards to the cumulative impact policy area and the people that are going to be attending. It is a burger restaurant tending to be young people going into these and possibly problems as they leave. Other than that, I really don't have any major objections or representations. And as Mr. Ware says, actually, if it was probably in another area, we wouldn't be in front of the committee at the moment. But we are here to give you the opportunity to decide on whether you feel it's appropriate for these premises to operate. And that's all I've got to say, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much for that. I think we'll hear from the licensing authority, and then we'll see if there's any questions from the panel members. So would the licensing officer like to comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you've already heard, this application is within a community of impact area. It's within the Headingley community of impact area, and in this area we handle the CIA slightly differently to we do in the city centre. What we do when an application comes in is we consult with the ward members, we discuss the application as applied for, and if the business is offering something that's different enough, something small, more expensive, a different style, then generally speaking we won't put in an objection. We feel that over the last 3 or 4 years, by doing it this way, we've seen a change in Headingley towards these smaller independent businesses, and that has made a difference in the crime statistics in the area, and we want to continue with that. In this particular case, as Mr. Ware has already said, this is a restaurant with restaurant conditions and moderate hours, and normally this wouldn't have attracted a representation from us, because this is the kind of application we encourage, this food-led restaurant style premises. The only issue that we really have with this is the size. It's 110 seats. It's a large venue, and where it's located right on the main drag in Headingley, right on the corner with North Lane, slap bang in the middle of our now much reduced CIA. The location itself is a problem for us, but also we felt that the menu, especially the drinks menu, is aimed at a younger market. However, they have offered a restaurant condition and moderate hours, and we really do feel that it's for members to decide whether this is of concern enough to warrant either additional conditions or refusal. We felt, ward members and myself and the police, that it was borderline, and that's pretty much all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to invite the applicant to do its their 5 minutes coming up, and because that might answer some questions members have, and then we'll come to the questions for panel members. So if you'd like to sum up, please.
I'll obviously do whatever just checking I'm unmuted, the committee would wish, but usually I get to sum up after the questions.
Okay, we'll do it that way around.
Just so that I can wrap up any issues that might be live. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Marsh-Guttung, any questions?
Yeah, I've got two questions.
Go ahead.
That's okay, Chair. It's one to Mr. Parker. Obviously, pre-pandemic, before we sort of, well, say this time last year, were there any issues of concern of increased antisocial behaviour as a result of the bars in the Headingley area that we maybe need to be aware of?
The latest data I've got is up until December 2019. As I say, the amount of public order increased slightly every year, basically, from 2016-17 up until the data I've got, which is December 2019. But it wasn't a significant amount. And to be fair, the data is for the Headingley area. We can't say what public order was attached to which premises or wherever in Headingley. So I couldn't go down to that level of detail with regards to the data, with regards to the public order. With regards to the assaults, they've been relatively level over the past 4 or 5 years, up a bit in some years, down a bit in others, but relatively level. So in answer to your question, no, I don't think there's anything that would cause a great deal more concern other than a relatively high level of public order. But as I say, it can't be definitely linked just to, well, certainly not to these premises because they're not operating, but whether it's to light premises or whether it's just to public houses or just general disorder.
Okay, thanks for that. And I just have one question for the applicant. Just sort of quickly scanning through the application and the documentation, is there any mention of door staff being on the premises?
It's not something that, and I'll obviously bring Michael to come in should he wish to, but it's not something that they've had to bring in any other areas where they operate. And members of the committee might be aware that Jesmond has a lot of striking similarities to Headingley. It's a student area and young professional area where just outside Newcastle, where a huge amount of either students or young professionals live. So it's a very similar demographic. And in the national CIP range, it was one of the first, like Leeds, to have an out of city centre cumulative impact policy because of the issues that are arising. But it's not something that they've had to use. It is very much a restaurant-led operation. And I think the other critical element is there's no other regulated entertainment. So people are sitting, having a meal, some are having an alcoholic drink, others aren't, and then they're leaving, and they've not needed to have door staff in their other premises. I think that's right, Michael. I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, just I would just say that it's not something we would normally do. We tend to have people off the premises by about 11 o'clock, so there wouldn't be a requirement. We have done it in certain isolated cases. For example, in Durham, when they have the Miners' Gala, which is once a year, we would perhaps put a member of door staff on for something like that, but that's just in line with other restaurants in that area. So yeah, but
I think here you'd be guided, obviously, if there was something that was impactful going on in Headingley, like something at the stadium, you'd be guided by the police to put door staff on if they felt there was a need for you to do that. You're certainly happy to do it, but in general practice, it's not something that you have to do.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Chair. I have no more.
Any questions from yourself, Councillor Marshall-Cotton?
Yeah, my only question was, Councillor Hutchinson has actually kind of asked, and Dave has said as well, was more specifics in terms of the data and what relates to the nuisance that's coming from the regular pubs and the one coming from proper restaurants. So obviously, if we don't have that, it's kind of difficult for me in terms of breaking out the data to see if this license is granted to this premises, that it's actually going to cause the nuisance that we are inferring at the moment.
Yes, I can just go really what I've said before. The data doesn't get that deep into which premises or which type of premises, unfortunately.
Okay, Thank you.
Any other questions from panel members? No, if I can invite the applicant then to sum up, please.
Chair, thank you very much. I would just ask you, when you're considering this, to just again read paragraphs 7.32, 7.36 and 7.37 of the Leeds policy. Highlights again that cumulative impact policies are not an absolute bar to stopping new applicants coming in and having an application granted. And I think paragraph 7.36 and 7 are really helpful for you to, I hope, agree with me that this is an application that should be granted. I think if you've got the police who are checking with the police in other areas where we trade in cumulative impact policy areas to find that we haven't caused any issue, that should give you a lot of comfort. I think accepting that the data is somewhat out of date for this particular area is important. I do think that just saying it tends to be, by looking at the menu, something that is for younger people shouldn't be something that would preclude a license being given, because certainly somewhere I would go, and I'm not classed as a young person anymore, but I think if younger people go there and they're behaving, it doesn't matter what age they are. And I think the fact that we have a modest alcohol selection, it's 90% dry to wet sales, we're offering the restaurant condition, we're not asking for any other regulated entertainment. It's a restaurant with moderate hours. And I would suggest, Chair, members of the committee, that's entirely what you would expect to be something that would rebut the presumption for refusal and allow this licence to be granted. Again, I'll just go back to the test I would ask you to envisage. Are people who are eating a burger and maybe having a drink in here going to adversely impact on the licensing objectives? In my submission, no evidence to suggest that they will before you today. Are they going to behave in such a way when they leave the premises that it's going to have a negative impact? Again, no evidence to suggest that that would be the case. It's not what happens elsewhere. Quality operator, they know what they're doing, and they are going to be, if you grant this license, an exciting addition to the Headingley area. It's an operation which I commend to you, and I would suggest in the circumstances when you analyse the policy, it's one that you can move away from the policy starting point and find that we've rebutted the presumption and the licence can be granted. Chair, those are the points I wish to make in closing submissions.
Thank you very much for that. The subcommittee will now move into private session to deliberate on the application. Could I ask that all parties, including the applicant and their representatives and licensing officer, remain available should the subcommittee have any additional questions? If there are any additional questions, you will be invited back into the meeting by the clerk. Over to you, clerk.
Asha, can you move us into the breakout room, please?
Are we all back in? I don't think we are now.
No, we're still waiting for some.
Yeah, there we go. That looks like everyone.
Right, I think that's all of us, Chair.
You're on pause.
You're on mute,
Councillor Ray.
Councillor Ray.
Do you know, it always happens right at the end. Thank you for everyone for your attendance. That concludes the business for today. You will be informed of the decision within 5 working days. Thank you.